Mujer, get ready for a very powerful conversation on today's episode because we are going to talk about all things how to run for office. This is a topic that has a lot to do with wealth and power. And so I wanted to bring an expert to this episode. So, Diana, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Lucy. It is a pleasure to connect with you and have a conversation with you.
Amazing. I want to talk about running for office because I personally feel that we are not represented at the table that literally runs how this country is essentially, yeah, like run, right? Like, let's talk about why Latinas need to run for office. But before we get there, I know a little bit about you because I was stalking you online. I read your bio, your website, and everything. Tell us, like, who is Diana Maldonado and why is this mission so important to you?
Yes. Well, it takes me back to a border town, and I grew up in Southwest Texas, Eagle Pass, which was with the frontera with Piedras Negras, Coahuila. And we're not originally from there, but grew up there. Very humble, I would say nostalgic upbringing, because in any border town, and as well as Latinos who live in poverty, as a young child, you don't know what you don't know. And so I do have very fond memories of growing up in a small border town, but I later came to realize as I was growing up that there was a lot of disparities when it came to education. And then also seeing my mother struggle with money and how she perceived money, that then I, in turn, later in years, carried that story or that burden. And along the way, education was the one component that I felt would be the biggest disruptor and the equalizer for people to forge their own path of however they wanted to build it. It was very unique to them. And again, as Latino families, that is one aspect that is very, very important to our culture and to make sure that the next generation continues to thrive and prosper through education. And as I went into my profession, I was always had that mindset or that inkling of finding, if I want education to be better, where does it start? And it started with politics. And it made me think, oh, it is about running for office. It is about being an advocate, or it isn't about being in a position to where you can lend your voice and pitch your voice of yourself and others to be able to form legislation and shape policy that is reflective of the communities. Because and it still continues to happen, Lucy, where we're so flustered with the laws that are passed that do not represent Latinos and do not represent Latina entrepreneurs and do not value education and whatever those important cultural and American aspects that are important to Latinos.
I love that. Now, I want to bring you back a little bit because you mentioned that education was super important to you. And a lot of us have parents that didn't even finish elementary school. What is the background of your family in terms of education? Are you the first one to go to college, second?
No, and it's quite, we, to some extent, our family doesn't follow that traditional story that I was the first. I'm happy to say I was not the first. I would say my younger sister, who's 15 months younger than me, was the first to graduate from college. My older brother went into the military and the Marines. So I would be the second to have graduated from college, but it took me 17 years because in that time, Lucy, fell in love, got pregnant, married, and I wanted to get married, had two children. So my life took a different trajectory. But in that first 2 years of being married, I had started school, but it wasn't until I got a divorce that I had left a dream unfulfilled. And I wanted to close that chapter. And so as I was getting a divorce, going through a divorce, I enrolled in evening classes here in Austin, Texas at St. Edward's University. And I was on a mission. And I think I know I appreciated education better in that time in my life because I really was just absorbing the education, like the marketing and branding, the different types of themes and topics that we were studying at the time, because I was older and I could appreciate the theory as well as having the lived experience as a professional at that time. So it took me, like I said, went back 17 years, graduated magna cum laude from St. Edward's University with a BA in business administration. And that was literally one of the most happiest times of my life, because our parents raised us to where it wasn't an option. We were going to go to college. Now, granted, they weren't around, and my father worked out of town. My mother was always working, and it was a mindset that they just instilled in us that we were going to do, you know, good things and give back to the community. And so, even though they didn't know how, we didn't know either. We just knew we were going to go to college,
Right.
growing up in a border town. But I think what our parents taught us to some extent by default was that we had to figure it out on our own of how to get there. So
Yeah.
out of the four siblings, three of us graduated from higher education, and my older brother served honorably in the Marine Corps as well. I think they did pretty good with very, very limited resources, but also always instilling that picture of possibility. And the one caveat that I will say that my father did, that again, while we didn't couldn't afford it, we lived in, poverty or just enough. He saw it to where he bought the World Book Encyclopedia for us, and later bought the Britannica Encyclopedia for us, because he knew at some point we were destined for greater things and to be, like he says, be a good citizen.
So much. Now, Diana, you are one of the very first Latinas to run for office and then be elected for office. Am I saying that correctly?
Yes.
Why did you decide to go there, by the way? Because there's so many people and I hear these like, I want to run for office, but just like a lot of dreams, they stay behind doors. What
Right.
inspired you to say, I will do it and I will become the first one, specifically in a state that is very, very much like, I don't even want to say the words, but you know what I'm saying? Like it.
It's very challenging. It's racist. There's a lot of negativities, but as a proud Texan, I deserve to be here and I deserve to live life to the fullest. And I'll make an adjustment that I was the first Latina to be elected in Williamson County. So while there's still very, very few Latinas elected to a state representative in Texas, I was the first one to be elected in Williamson County, which is a conservative district. And so I ran as being the first Latina to run in a non-Latino majority and the first Democrat to be elected in a non-Democratic majority. So there was a lot of firsts. And I think part of the naivete is not knowing all of those landmines, but just knowing that there's a vision ahead. And one of the things that I learned is that I don't know how I'm going to win, but I know I will win. Because there was a lot of experts that were, you know, they knew their craft really well, and I was not going to get in their business. Like, okay, you're part of the team. I will do what have you, but I will make sure that I knock on doors and raise money. And how I got to that, Lucy, was simply it came back to full circle of education. I had graduated from St. Edward's University. I, again, single parent, had recently gone through a divorce. I had a teen and a preteen, and I started tinkering, like, what do I do now? And I've always been a busy person to where I like to stay active. Or let's just say curiosity is an adjective that people used to describe me, because I'm curious what's around the corner. And sometimes they don't work, but you don't know until you give it a try. And so when I was at that moment in time that they call that liminal space, that in between space is a space of the biggest growth and the biggest introspection, to be able to have that certain clarity to say, this is what it is. And in that time, I said, I am going to take a break. I'm going to be here for my kids because they sacrificed a lot while I've been away working full time. and going to school full time. And sure enough, the universe says, no, no, you're not going to rest. I had the Latino leaders here in Round Rock that they were looking to support a candidate for the school board. And I went to this meeting with a bunch of other folks who were also putting their name in the ring. And I really was very agnostic about the idea. But one of the things that I did was, as a single parent, is what is my biggest budget item? And a lot of people don't do this homework, but the biggest budget item was property taxes. Because in Texas, property tax funded by property taxes. So I said, okay, I need to be paying attention more to school board meetings. I need to be paying attention. How are they talking about the budget and where they're allocating the services? Are they even delivering good educational services? So I really kind of the cliche statement of I want to know how my property taxes are administered. That's also what made me think about that. And when the Latino leader said, we've talked it over, we want to support you to run for school board, I just took a breath and I said, no, but I was supposed to take time off and spend with my kids. Because at that point in time, I was going to take a year off and then go back to get like my MBA or a master's in public administration or in finance. So I had those three, but I really needed a year break. Well, that year break never came because then after talking it with my mom and family, I said, wow, this is a totally uncharted territory. I have no idea because Lucy, I have never seen a Latino look like me that's in public office. I had never seen women. And does my voice matter? Like, is this really the opportunity for me to say that I would always advocate for kids and education? And I had to also answer my own question like, okay, well, this is what you called up. Now this is it. And that's
Were
how
there
it
any
started.
fears that you had, like as you're going into these? Like, can you walk us through like
Mhm.
the time when you're going through all of these? Like, what were the thoughts that you were having, the doubts, and how were you able to overcome them?
Yes, it's very daunting because, again, as growing up, you only see white male politicians, you only see rich people. So you have this persona of what a politician is. And I look at myself like, who am I to even run? Like, what? I mean, I know my issues, but who am I? Like I kept questioning myself as well. But the one thing or several things was that I was surrounded by a good support of people, older than myself, around my age. And then of course talking to teachers and looking at kids and that culmination of personalities and support, it was like it held its own synergy to say, I am going to do that. And the one thing is like I didn't know that all it took because I was also pretty neutral or agnostic in the voting process. I wasn't an active voter. I was, like I said, I got married young. I started having a family, so there was other priorities in my life, but I knew the importance of presence and I knew the importance of voice and I knew the importance of having like diversity because I again, I was tired of having the same old and I'm like, when are they going to be talking about issues that reflect and represent me? And when I say me, I would say Latinos and people of color.
Mhm.
So I think it was sitting on the sidelines no longer became an option. It was more the impetus of those caveats that said, I know very little, but even then, a very practical way somebody would say no. And in spite of me knowing very little, little about the political process, I'm still going to go for it because I'm going to lean on this and people of support to guide me along. And I trust that as a professional, by now I had already worked, several more than a decade at the state controller's office. I was already a manager. I was already, a professional in a supervisory role. So I said, I'm going to lean on that than to bring it to the table to guide me and trust my instincts with it. And it was like when you see your name on a sign, on the side of the road or in somebody's yard, it's like it's very surreal. And at the same time, wow, strangers believe in me. Like I really must do this now.
Yes, I
Yeah.
think that goes to shift the question of like, why not me? And
Yeah.
that is one of my favorite questions to ask myself whenever I want to do something bigger that it literally scares me, that I'm like shaking, like, I don't know if I should apply. And I have all these mindset traps that keep me from becoming my best version. And so I start training my brain to ask, like, why not me? If
Hmm.
they're doing it, why not me? And that has served me well. Now,
Yeah.
Diana, you mentioned two things that
Uh-huh.
as a politician or as someone running for office can hold a lot of people back from actually saying, yes, I'm going to put my name there. One is divorce, and the other one is money. Because we have been told that in order to run for office, we have to have a family, and that family dynamic is very much male and female, right? Like that's a traditional way. And we have also been told that in order to run for office, our personal finances need to be crystal clear.
Hmm.
So, did you face any obstacles or challenges with that? Or were you just like, no, I'm going to go, like, walk us through the process there?
Well, you picked up on two very, very important aspects of a female candidate in as much as a Latina or a female person of color to be a candidate. Because first and foremost, as candidates, donors give more to male candidates than female candidates. It's just a given stat. And again, it's all the relatability of what they have been seeing over decades, over time. And I think, Lucy, in all wholeheartedness, if I were still married, I probably would not have run for office. At that time, I was divorced because we had different philosophies of life, and we had different ways of how we looked at money in life. And I'll give a little quick background on being married. With I mean, I have respect for my ex-husband right now, and no, just and all good for him. But we just came at a point in time that over time we outgrew each other. But at that time, I wanted us to purchase a home, and he was very comfortable in renting all his life. And at the time, I was more ambitious. I wanted to, level up and excel. And he was like, why can't you just be happy with what you have? And there's
Hold
nothing
on.
wrong with that.
I'm like, hold on, let me stop that right there. And because you just said something that holds a lot of my busy mujeres
Hmm.
from going after their dreams. Like, why can you just be happy? And a lot of people don't understand people like you and I and the listeners because we are so ambitious. So I just want to point that out because that is huge. Like, we're normalizing this
Yeah.
conversation. So go on.
Well, and it's true, and I think you're right that a lot of Latinas will stop there and then feel guilty and like, oh my God, who am I to question for wanting more? And there was a short point in time in my life that 3 years I didn't volunteer, I didn't do anything. I became like the happy housewife, which to me was not to my liking. But then I said to him, you know what? I tried this. I don't like it. My life is about helping others, being in community, volunteering. And quite frankly, I just came to the realization that if my father raised me to be this way, why would I change who I am to please you? And because you are uncomfortable, but we can have a conversation. And we didn't. So we got divorced and we knew that our time had come, and so then when I divorced, it was post divorce that I had the opportunity to really create my life in a way that resonated with me and in a way that held my curiosity to tackling things that were very, very challenging. But it was. I think as a candidate, a Latina, there were more obstacles than there weren't. Again, it's the raising money, it's having the support. And again, my family wasn't politically active or engaged. So it was kind of like, how do you have a conversation with them that doesn't resonate? But I just knew that I wanted to do this. So I didn't involve my family per se, like siblings, of course, my son and daughter had to go through it no matter what. But I didn't have that like, oh, the rah rah, they're coming in because they were also new to it. So they didn't know how to react to it. But instead of like just feeling badly that they didn't support me, I'm like, you know what? It's about giving space and grace for this new process for everybody. So, but I did have friends because since I worked in at the comptrollers, it's a political environment. And then I had friends who did support me. And again, the community here in Round Rock did support me. So I found another, ally and support of groups that helped me get through that phase. And this was just only school board, Lucy. Looking back, that was so easy compared to running for state representative.
Yeah.
And my first race, I won with 67% of the vote. And when I ran for reelection, and I raised maybe $3,000, which to me was a phenomenal amount of money. And then I ran for reelection for the school board. And my boyfriend at the time, I said, you know what? I really want to win with 80% of the vote. And again, conservative, white district. And my boyfriend at the time goes, Tiana, remember who you are. And he goes like this, like basically settle for whatever vote you get. A
Ooh.
win's a win. And I just
And that
looked
boyfriend is no longer around, is he?
correct. So on election night, I won with 79.4%. And I told him, never question me again of what I can or cannot do.
Yeah.
And at that time, like I would say I probably raised around $5,000. So I was getting a little bit more comfortable, like asking people for money, while at the same time, I'm managing my own household expenses. So I have these two different types of worlds kind of converging. But it wasn't until when I ran for state representative that took it to a whole new ball field. And through that experience, Lucy, and then subsequently having worked as a financial advisor at Morgan Stanley, I am on a mission to help and collaborate, with experts like yourselves and to help women to talk about money as an option, as an accessory, and to help them build wealth, to help them have options, to help them look at life differently because money is a tool. It's
Yeah.
not taboo. I'm a big believer in that because I had to go through that lesson to kind of let that mindset go and that frame set go that my mom had versus to now what does Diana want and have and can create from that because other women will be looking at me. My daughter will be looking at me. My granddaughter will be looking at me. So I feel also a deep responsibility to have have clarity and comfortable with money and use it as a word. It's a five-letter word
Yeah.
and use it with joy and possibility.
That in money is also the fuel for policy. Without money, we cannot create policy. We cannot be represented. We cannot protect like the US Constitution, like all of these things that we think are not relatable to money. Like money creates all of that. The
It
roads
is.
that we drive, the access to healthcare, access to knowledge, access to the library, like all of this is fueled by money.
Yeah.
Earlier, you said like something about asking people for money. I love asking people for money. Like one of the
Hmm.
things that I do now, if I volunteer for any organizations, they're always like, well, what would you like to do? I'm like, let me ask people for money. And they're like, really? Nobody wants to do that work. And I said, well, first of all, I have already a beautiful relationship with money 10 years ago, but probably would never volunteer to do this kind of work. But now I love it because the people that I go and ask, like, hey, would you donate for this cause? They're like, yeah, let me write you a check. And for me, that goes to show how we as Latinas and people of color can also have that abundant relationship with money where we're not afraid to write a check for a candidate or an organization that we love. And
Hmm.
so I just wanted to add my 2 cents on that. Like money fuels policy, and we just need to own it and embody that we have not just economic power, but power in terms of like how laws are created, the laws that
Yes.
affect or benefit us. So Diana, you founded your candidacy school.
Hmm.
So can we talk about that? Because I when I saw that, I was like, oh my God, this is so juicy. And I am not in politics. Like my family, I think somewhere along the line, maybe had an uncle or two that were doing that kind of stuff. But my mom was like, nope, that's not for us. So
Hmm.
growing up, I was never really involved, but you decided to launch your school to
Hmm.
help Latinas run for office. So can you walk us through maybe like three, four strategies that people can do as well as like promoting your services? Because I just think this is fascinating.
Yes, and it came also. I kind of go through these reflection points where I come to full circle, and it wasn't until I went on a hiking expedition to Patagonia, and I was in between, jobs and careers and what have you. And one of the things that kept popping up was I kept seeing, the political landscape change and the discourse going negatively. And then I also kept seeing, well, what's missing? I goes, more women are missing. And that's why we have these terrible laws and these terrible policies that are sending our nation in a wrong direction. And this is one of the things that I said, if I could do it over, these are the things I wish I knew. But since I'm not going to run for office, how can I form a course or a program that I can share with women across the nation for them to do their own self vetting and analysis and reflections? And when they do the course, and it's centered around money, managing money, policy, and power. Those are the three tenets. And the money part is asking for money, but it's also you personally getting comfortable with money. Are you going to have to quit your job? Or do you have a spouse that's going to support you as you're being a candidate and while in office, if the position is a volunteer elected? And so all of those questions that women don't know going into it, and then they're like freaking out or stressing out. So it takes away the joy of them being in public office. The other one is the policy. Like I want to make sure that there's healthy trails so that there's movement and exercise, to combat some health and diseases that are impacting our younger generation. So you look at policy, and it takes you to some modules on policy. And then the power, Lucy, which is so important, that I say don't be a negative headline in the paper. As a Latina and as a woman, we don't have parity in Congress and in our state legislatures. And so when we get there, use that power honorably. Remember who got you elected and remember your why, and use that as your values and principles of staying in office and also keeping the integrity of that power in check. So it's 20 daily lesson plans, but there's three different tiers that helps a woman taking the course to go through that discernment reflection, because they will find out, okay, now I'm ready to file and look at the dates, or you know what, I may need some more time, or guess what, maybe it's not for me and I'm really glad I took this course. I'm going to then go help out as a campaign manager or some other role which they can better be a better fit for them to participate in. And this is for first time candidates, because again, as a first time candidate for a state rep, nobody told me the lessons. Nobody told me what to watch out for. And it was a grueling process. It was not pretty and it was very lonely. And I would say it was more lonelier being a Latina, and then also having that imposter syndrome of that money component as well. And I think that now in time that there's just so much resources. I just see Latinas professionally just growing and being so dynamic. But the one thing that's missing is them looking or a swath of Latinas and women looking to possibly run for office.
Yes. As you know, I'm writing a book, and there's something about that kind of like, hey, we're missing this opportunity here. So I don't want
Hmm.
to give away what's in the book, but there's a section of the book that specifically talks about why Latinas need to run for office. And as you were talking, I started to wonder, do you have to be an extrovert to run for office?
No, no, absolutely not. In fact, I invite the introvert leadership. That's that quiet leadership. I also notice that when there's a quiet leader, I'm observing them because they're taking notes, but when they say something, it's very substantial. It's very profound. So there's different types of leaderships, and I would say the people that say the least are the ones that will give you the most depth versus somebody who's just always shouting and the same old phrases and the same rhetoric. It's very superficial. And so you can tell that there's a different ego, the superficial ego versus the real ego and learning how to use that power well. So there's different types. I mean, you have introverts, you have extroverts, you have in the middle, you have all kinds. I think it's that how it draws and resonates to somebody of how they see themselves in public office and to never forget that they are to serve their constituency.
Love that. I
Hmm.
can talk to you all day because literally I'm like, somebody bring me my lunch, my palomitas, because I really love this conversation. I love so much from every single one of you. I want to talk about the skill set because as I'm listening to you, I'm like, she's a great communicator, and a lot of people struggle with that. Like, I don't sound eloquent enough, or I don't sound like a politician, whatever that means for them. And so, what are some of the skill set that you, in your opinion, you believe Latinas should quote unquote polish before they run for office?
At first, I would say just be yourself. I think that Latinas, it's such a big, varied discourse or a platform of Latinas from different walks of life and different ethnicities. But the one thing is true about Latinas across the board is that they're informed, they're engaged, and they have something to say. And so then it's now kind of using that and how to craft that in a way that draws attention to the essence of what you're projecting and sharing versus anything physical that may be distracting to the voter or the audience. So I would say gone are the days work twice as hard and be the perfection. I think people love when people make a mistake or they trip on their words. I think that shows that the genuineness of that individual because that tells me that they're excited and they're passionate. And guess what? I'm going to listen more to them. I'm going to listen more to her because
Yes.
she has something to say versus somebody who's very scripted. No, I think, smiling, speaking intentionally, whether it's softly or robust, but also at the same time that you're being heard in a way that resonates with your audience. Know your audience. Maybe you're with the librarians. I mean, I'm just saying, and they may be more of a quieter group. So you're not going to go in there, shouting, or maybe you're speaking to a group of cheerleader moms and football parents, well, then your speech is going to be different.
I
So
love that.
it's being flexible, being adaptable, but always keeping the core of your message true and consistent is what you do. I would say smile. There's lessons on the appearance, but don't be too scripted and don't let people take away the true essence of who you are. Because when I was running for state rep, when I was a little girl, I always had the short hair, and so as an adult, I've always had long hair, but they had told me that I needed to cut my hair. And I'm like, "What?" That goes, "No, this is what a candidate looks like, and you're gonna get more votes if you look a certain way."
You're
I
too
said
feminine.
"I am not gonna cut my hair." Do you know how long it took me to and I didn't. I just kept it neat. I'm like, my hair is my thing. Like, I'm not going to do that. I will look at other things. If you want me to wear red instead of blue, okay, I'll consider it. But, I'm not going to cut my hair. And I remember them saying that to me. And of course, the suits, what have you. But I think we also live in a more casual world that I hardly own a suit anymore, but I know how to present and be well and be respectful of of the audience and the person's time that I'm also in a polished, presentable way.
Diana, I love this conversation, and I don't want to let you go without asking you, what is your definition of wealth and where can people find you?
I would say now my definition of wealth is looking internally and it's my health. I would say that if I'm not healthy, then I cannot be good and help others pass on the knowledge that I have. So it starts with my health. And to me, wealth is also having those opportunities and looking for the saying that I say, how can I create this? Because when you bring in that residence, then you also attract those opportunities, whether it's through money, whether it's through people, or whether it's through opportunities to help create and build out that wealth. And my form of wealth is to share it with others.
I love it. Thank you so much for coming to the show. And for the listeners, make sure that you give her a follow. We're going to put her information in the show notes. And with that being said, let's go ahead and build wealth juntas.
Yes, let's do it.